onset of the call. So today we're talking about something a little bit different, a little bit interesting, and definitely something that is very important. So with us today, we have Reverend Katina Jones. Let me tell you a little bit about her. So Reverend Katina is a highly sought after spiritual teacher, ordained minister, author, and founder of the Purple Priestess. Katina has a deep understanding of death, grief, metaphysics, and ancient wisdom, which is why I've invited her to join us today so that we can discuss how to do death differently. And I find that this is such an important topic. So, Reverend Katina, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good.
Angelica, right? Did I say right?
Angelica, yes.
Angelica.
Yes.
Angelica. Um, I'm so excited to be here. I know it's not like the most exciting topic for everyone because it's the thing we don't want to think about and it's
Mm-hmm.
the thing we don't want to plan for.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of part of this new death positive movement where we talk about it more openly. And there are lots of people who started that movement. I mean, Patty Burgess in Philadelphia is a death doula and teacher, and she coined the phrase doing death differently. And I think it's a beautiful way to reframe
Mm-hmm.
death and the
Mm-hmm.
experience that people go through. Um, it used to be, well, let me back up and just say that I'm a death doula and a grief coach, and I blend traditional support, the practical hands-on things that you need to know with ancient wisdom so that I can guide people and their loved ones through this process of the final journey.
And when we connected, I think that's so beautiful. But let's back up a little bit. How did you even get there? Because even in your intro, you said like right now, it's like people don't want to talk about this. So how did you go from whatever you were doing to
It's really
actually being
crazy.
a death doula?
Well, my mother died in 1988 of ovarian cancer after a 2-year illness. And I was very young. I didn't know what I was doing. The hospice was still pretty new at that point. So, my dad and I got training, but it was only crash and burn because we were so close to the end.
Hmm.
And the second my mom kind of took a nosedive, my dad panicked and called the ambulance. And then I didn't know she was going to get thrown off hospice for that, that you end up going back in the hospital. And in the hospital, the doctors are trained to sustain life.
Hmm.
It's it's what they do. They don't have any classes. Maybe they have one course that's about death and dying, and it covers Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's, you know, philosophies and her 7 stages and all of that, but they don't really learn very much about it, and they are very afraid to talk about it because it means failure to them.
Right, right,
It means that they lost a patient, and
right.
so they're in the business of saving lives. And
Mhm.
so my mom got put back into the hospital and died a kind of a miserable death
Hmm.
that afterwards made me so angry because I thought, well, first I was angry at myself. I was thinking, I did this wrong. I did this wrong and I could have done so much better for her. I've done better for my animals than I did for my mother, you know. And I think that started me thinking about it. But then I started also, because I was a writer at the time, I went to a metaphysical fair and I met a woman who actually did a reading for me and told me I was going to be doing this work. And she told me all about my mother. She had her name, she had everything. I mean, like this woman I never met before. She only had my mom's wedding ring in her hand and got all of this information. And she said, "This is how you will heal what happened with your mother. And this is how you will make her proud. You'll do this for other people. And every time you do it for other people, you're doing it for her again."
Mhm.
And so I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I didn't believe it at first, and it took me a few years. I'm a little bit of a hard head. So my spirit guides have, like we do couples counseling together, regularly. But
I might have to try that one with mine.
yeah, I think he gets a little frustrated at times. But when I started the Purple Priestess last year, it was after years of hospice volunteering, having hands-on experience, and having this ad hoc thing happened because the universe said to me when I had to stop volunteering after when we were raising our kids, um, I said I would come back. I promised I would circle back when I raised my kids and I was done, which I have done. Um, However, the universe had its own plans and said the hospice is everywhere. It's the
Mhm.
person sitting next to you on the airplane that we put there because that person's grieving and they need to talk to somebody, and you're the one that is going to get this today. So, and I would get these messages, and I would be like on a business trip, and I'd be sitting, sure enough, next to somebody, and they start crying and telling me what's going on. And then I would just start working with them and doing the grief coaching naturally. And so when I got the message from my spirit guide that it was time now, one of the things he said is that, you could call it the Purple Priestess because you love purple and you're a reverend, you're ordained. And that's fun and it's interesting and positive,
Mhm.
but put the tagline with it where it's where souls find solace.
Mhm.
So, you know, tell people it's not a geographical place. It's inside us where we find that solace and how we find that solace. So, I think that now we're starting to see a lot of people, and in the meantime, by the way, I also became a certified doula giver's death doula. So I went through the training, the certification, and I also got trained in doing end of life planning services. So I do, like the 5 wishes, and I also have an online th program that I use through Thanacare. I'm a partner of theirs that we can create a plan that you can access with a QR code, or even if you're in an accident, God forbid, the hospital staff can access that and get a video of you saying what you want, literally, and
Oh,
have all
okay.
your planning there. It's very cool and not
Okay.
very expensive. It's a great option
Okay.
for planning. But it's about planning. It's about mindfulness. It's about spirituality. Not
Mhm.
necessarily religion, but spirituality. It's
Mhm.
religion if you bring that to it.
Mhm.
And you have to meet people where they are. That's what I was trained in hospice to do. And it's also what I'm learning in my graduate studies in social work because I want to do the palliative care work
Mhm.
in a clinical setting eventually. So yeah, and at the same time, there's this incredible movement to reimagine death and think about it differently. In the old days, in the Victorian days especially, oh my gosh, everybody wore black and, they put the wreath on the door to let everyone know the family was in mourning for
Mhm.
months, and it would just go on and on. And of course, they had the funeral service in the home at that time. So the body would literally be laid out on the dining room table,
Mhm.
and people would come in the parlor and pay their respects. The families would actually prepare the body. There wasn't, the funeral
Mhm.
industry didn't start till later. So then when the funeral industry started, the reason it started and the reason bodies became preserved was because of the Civil War, because the bodies on the battlefield needed to be preserved to be brought home for proper burial. So that's
Really?
when that started. And I learned all of this at the National Museum of Funeral History in Houston, Texas, which is my very favorite museum.
Oh
I
my God,
just
I
love
lived
it.
there for 10 years, almost 11, 10 years. I'd never even heard of it.
Oh my gosh.
Not that I
Oh,
was looking for it precisely,
no,
but
nobody is looking for it. But
exactly.
when you find it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And they have all these cheeky things in the gift shop. Like I have a mug that says every day above ground is a good day. And that's their
Okay.
motto.
Okay.
Love it.
Yeah.
But they show you all the different types of burials that happened, starting with ancient Egyptian times and then moving forward, to Victorian era and then over the 50s. And then they cover like celebrity funerals and the presidential funerals. And they were actually the planners for the presidential funerals that happened during our lifetime. So they did, I think they did Ford and Reagan and I can't remember who else, but anyhow, they've done a number of these very famous people's ceremonies. And the interesting thing is the focus has always been on the grief and on the negative side and on the sad side.
Yes.
And what we have to realize is, first of all, death is the one thing we can't escape from. Every one of us is going to experience it. It's how we choose to experience it that matters.
Hmm.
It's how we want other people to remember us that matters. So, and the time to think about that is long before you're in a hospital bed, you know, with somebody there doing the last rites. That
Hmm.
is not the time to be thinking because, first of all, you're on a lot of medications, maybe. You've got other things going on. There's a lot of emotion. There's people around. Everybody has their opinion. The time to do it is before. And when you're literally of sound mind,
Right.
and in a situation where hopefully you're having a nice glass of wine, sitting there with your notebook, writing down
Hmm.
a few things that you think would matter to you and what you would want, what songs you want played, um, what kinds of flowers you would want if you are going to have any,
Hmm.
um, whether or not you want specific readings at your ceremony. And I think, I just did one of the happiest celebrations of life that I've ever participated in. I just officiated it last weekend, and it was here in the mountains. It was beautiful. It was a gorgeous day. And you could see the lake behind and the mountains up above. Sharp Top Mountain was up there. And this was a place that this woman who had passed liked to come to visit her daughter. She just loved to
Hmm.
be there because it was so beautiful. So her
Hmm.
daughter decided this is where we're going to do her celebration of life. But this was a woman who had dedicated, she was a normal, regular housewife. She was happy to be that. She loved her family and her children. She loved other people's children. She taught for a while. She worked at the American Girl store and did crafts with the girls and little parties for their dolls.
Hmm.
So at the funeral, there was a station in the back corner where it was a make and take hair bow thing
Uh-huh.
because when she had had cancer surgery, brain cancer surgery, and so she had a scar, and she used to put this big bow there. She put these big bows with bling on them and stuff, because she was like in your face cancer,
Hmm.
and people really enjoyed this make and take station, and everyone was wearing the bows, and the men were wearing them on their lapel, or I mean, it was fabulous.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on. So, first of all, thank you. You're making me teary-eyed halfway through already. Like I'm here like
Sorry.
because it's no, but it's such a beautiful, it's odd to say, but it's a beautiful part of life that you're right. We're all eventually going to be there. And I completely agree that it's not something we want to think about or talk about. But if you do have the time to sit down, like you said, maybe with a glass of wine or something calm while we're good. For me, it's kind of like that whole life insurance, like a life policy in case something happens. You're doing this not just for you, you're doing this for the people you love because we never know when we're going to die. We're talking about it's not just death by you're getting sick and you're getting old or you have something. It can be an accident. It could be all of a sudden. It could be
Yeah.
tomorrow. So it's not and we all have a tendency to want to push that thought and that conversation away. But it is a
It's the thing
matter
we
of
do after the gym. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. It's kind of like it's so
Yeah.
important to really sit there. And I love that you said, like what is it that you would want? Would you want certain songs, certain flowers, like specific readings? And the fact that they're calling it now, because I've heard it several times, that it's more of a celebration of life. It's not that sadness and grief and like that emptiness. It's the, okay, yes, we're gonna miss them because they're not with us in body anymore. But let's look at all the good that they brought to our lives. That's where I get teary-eyed. My voice is cracking.
Because that's what we take with us.
Right,
We don't take with us all the sadness all the time, and who would want us to do that?
right,
Nobody.
right,
We wouldn't want that for other people. We wouldn't, I don't know about you. I don't want people crying a lot at my funeral. Maybe a few tears before, when they find out initially. Then, let's start laughing about me.
right.
Let's start preparing for the Katina Jones end of life clearance sale that is absolutely indicated in my will.
I love that. Yeah,
And
and
then,
and
that's the
and
thing
it's
with the
all that.
planning. We laugh,
Uh-huh.
we talk, we enjoy it. It's actually not a downer at all. We
Hmm.
have fun with it in a way, and turn it on its head and say, okay, what do we want? You
Hmm.
know, like, if I was working with you on that, that's what we would do. We would be talking about it and laughing, and I would be asking you, what's important to you?
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not like I've always told, so I have just one daughter, and
Mhm.
I've always told her, honey, if I'm dead, I'm not there. That's just the body, my spirit left. That's not me.
Yeah.
Don't go through a hassle. Just like, no, we'll figure it out. And I've always told her, we'll figure it out. I'll leave you whatever it is. Like, you don't need to worry about that. Like, that's not going to be a big issue because I don't want her to have to go through, like, what we're saying, the preparations and the planning and this, plus her pain, plus everybody telling her your mom would have wanted that. No, it's like, let's take that away from everybody. And I love what you
Mhm.
said about the whole QR code and the video of the whole thing because it's like, in your right mind, you're like, if I'm in a hospital, this is what I want done. There is no ifs or doubts if
Yeah,
I said that. Like,
exactly.
you have the
That's the
video.
value of that.
It's not
Yeah.
mom
But you
said,
also
it's
have that for the memory. You
oh,
know,
true.
you also, you
True.
do, because it's kind of like you're hearing it from them, and they're telling you what they expect from you
Mm-hmm.
and what they would want for you in those
Mm-hmm.
moments.
Right. Right.
And I think that's very valuable, because and that would be wonderful for your daughter to have and keep, because she
Mm-hmm.
would know she did the right things.
Mm-hmm. Right. And no
You would never have
doubting,
that
no.
question. Yeah.
Exactly. Never. Yeah. Perfect. Um, the other thing I was going to ask you is, it is starting to become more common. How open are people, let's say in medical institutions like that? How open are they to actually receive a death doula or know that this person, these are their last wishes and will they go
Yeah.
by that? Or is there still a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and
There is
okay.
because they can't figure out how to bill it through Medicare, for one thing.
Hmm.
So that's what the hospices are struggling with. It's how do we bill this? Because and how can we do it? And how can we regulate it? Because they have rules they have to follow too, and even their volunteers have to follow those protocols. So um, it's new for them. And a lot of times what I get from them is, well, what you do, our volunteers do for free. And it's like, yeah, kind of. Except that what I do is the whole package from start to finish, and I do it on a schedule. I do it on a schedule that works for the client and for me. The volunteers are available when they're available, and they're not when they're not.
Hmm.
And so, you may have a medical social worker on staff too who can help with different planning things and help with resources, but even they are overburdened.
Hmm.
And so, we found this out during COVID because
Hmm.
COVID was insane. It turned everything on its head in terms of the death experience, and because we couldn't even be there for people.
Right. Right.
So it had to be virtual, it had to be supportive, it had to be, there was more description of what people were going through or likely to be going through as their bodies were shutting down, so that their family could understand and be educated about that while they were sitting in another building
Hmm.
somewhere,
Or not
with a
even
mask
there.
on.
Like some
Or
of them
yeah,
just were told to be home. Like there's
they
just no
couldn't be
space.
there.
Right.
Exactly. And then when they died, the funerals were changed because they
Hmm.
couldn't be. So suddenly we had streaming services with
Hmm.
maybe four people wearing masks, and that's it. And so we had to learn how to do things differently. We had to learn. And the hospitals, I will say, the doctors in the hospitals, I had an interesting chat with an ICU doctor at Emory. My ex-mother-in-law had fallen, and she was there, and she was, in the ICU, and we were talking, and I told him, I'm a death doula, I'm trained, I'm certified, I'm here, and also I've known her for a long time, and I can help you with, the baseline of where she is and with her head injury, because I can tell you things about her cognitive abilities prior to the fall and now after.
Hmm.
So he was blown away. He had no idea. He had never heard of a death doula. And when I told him, as soon as I told him, he started including me in the huddle every day with the nurses and the doctor. He was like, come, you
Right.
know? And so I was one of them, and it was beautiful. And he was like, the nurses were saying, we need you here. We need you here. And yet they still haven't found a way to,
Hmm.
they are starting to hire in doulas full time in places like New York. LA, New Jersey, there are places like that, bigger places, municipalities, as they say.
Hmm.
Um, I'm out in the rural areas, so it's a little bit different. I'm in the mountains, a little more remote here. But what I find interesting is that everything got turned on its head and we had to think differently. And so people started being more open to
Hmm.
this idea and saying, I really love this idea of doing this for my relative because it is something special. It's like you could go to Great Clips and have anybody cut your hair any day of the week.
Hmm.
But if you have that one stylist that you love and you want to work with and you have a bond with and you feel
Hmm.
like you can communicate about what you want,
Hmm.
that's the value.
Hmm.
That's the value. And so I think to describe doulas that way is yeah, it's an honor too, though. It's a calling. It's so many things, and it's so rewarding because you have the most real conversations with people,
Hmm.
especially the ones who are the actual dying people, because
Hmm.
they have a lot to say. They have a
Do they?
lot on their minds. And their families aren't always open to hearing it because the family sometimes is in denial and says, "Oh, don't talk like that. You're not going to die. We're not letting you go yet. You're not going anywhere." And they're like, "I know I'm leaving next Tuesday." They know. They
Right,
know.
right,
And they can feel it. And so
right,
not all of them, but a
right.
lot of them can. And so they're like, "I really need to talk to you about this. There are some things I need somebody to know." And those are beautiful things that can be written down and shared with the family later too. And I love being able to do that. I love
Mm.
being able to bridge that gap in the grief process as well and say, this is what they were saying about you, and this is what you should know.
Right. And I think
Um,
that's beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful work what you're doing. And it's again, it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on the show because yes, not a lot of people talk about this,
yeah.
which ironically is odd because we're all gonna go through it, right?
So weird. Yeah.
But it's that
We
part
celebrate it
of
at Halloween, don't we?
right, right. But it's also that part of being there not just for the person, but for the families. I mean, it's not just the grief part, but it's the human to human connection. It's that connection of, I know you're going away. I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you. And not like that whole cold-hearted, rushed, maybe, no conversations talk, don't go there,
Mhm.
like all of that. It's an outside person with a very big open heart that's there and willing to receive all the
Yeah.
stories. And I think we've all heard of how many people, quote unquote, end up dying with so many regrets, so many things they didn't talk about, so many
Yeah.
dreams that they
Oh my
didn't
gosh. Yeah.
do, so many life goals that they're like, I still didn't get to do this, or I was so scared my entire life I never did this, and now I look back. So I'm sure you hear a lot of those conversations
Yeah.
and topics as
I
well.
do. I do. And one of my favorite stories about that is a woman who she was in a hospice and she was saying, I really regret that I never made it to France.
Mm.
I never got to see the Eiffel Tower, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, let's go now. So I pulled up my phone and
Uh-huh.
a little video,
Uh-huh.
and it was a tour of, and she loved, I said, see, we did it. We
Uh-huh.
did it
Nice.
just right here, right now. And sometimes you can do it in that moment. I think the hardest thing for people is actually after someone dies and after the funeral. Like when you have the funeral going on, you've got all these people around you, you've got everybody supporting you, you've got cards, food, you know, all of this stuff. And then it gets really quiet.
Mm.
And in that moment is when most people fall apart
Mhm.
because they have, that's when your grief really sits with you.
Mhm.
And what it's asking you to do is to be with it and to love it and honor it. And most people are afraid and want to fight it and, want to be angry about it or want to be many other things. But what I tell them in that moment is this is the time to continue your conversations. This is the time to start talking to that person. And maybe there were things you didn't resolve in this life, but you
Mm-hmm.
can resolve so much better now that they're in spirit and they're at a 36,000 foot view and they can see it differently.
Right.
So maybe you can heal that now, and maybe that's the best time in a way. So, you have to kind of look at these things in a very different way. It's reimagining death, but it's also reimagining and reinventing grief and
Mm-hmm.
saying grief is really what it is about missing the connection with that person. So how do you stay connected? You meditate, you work on your frequency because it's all about tuning in, like a psychic does. That's what they do. They tune
Right.
into frequency.
Right.
So we can all do that.
Right.
Everybody can.
Do you find that when you tell somebody that, is it, I'm imagining for some people it's going to be harder because they fight it, and some people can connect right away, or what do you find
Yeah,
in that
some
case?
people can. Well, the people who can are people who are very, very spiritual and who see a butterfly go past, like in the middle of the funeral or the celebration of life that I did over the weekend. We saw right at the time when we finished doing the eulogies, there was a butterfly that went by and
Mhm.
everybody saw it and knew that was Karen. You know,
Mhm.
she came by just to say thanks.
Right.
Um, some people get that naturally
Hmm.
because they have that elevated frequency and they're on it.
Hmm.
Um, Other people kind of look at me and say, "What? What are
Hmm.
you
That's what I
talking
was
about? I have
thinking.
no idea what you mean." And I couldn't do that if I tried.
Hmm.
No, you can actually, because if you can lay down and do hypnosis, or if you can lay down and do meditation, which most people can, um, you can reach that level of frequency and openness. And for some people, it takes time
Hmm.
because their emotions will get in the way of it and it'll pull them back. So you have to learn and practice to let go of that. It's really a process of letting go so that you can allow. It's a Zen thing, you
Right.
know? Thich Nhat
Right.
Hanh says that you don't own anything until you can let it go.
Mm. Beautiful.
You
Let
know?
me ask you about grief in the sense of everybody, I think, processes differently. And now, because of things like you do and other people like you, we're all
Mhm.
starting to see that it can be done differently. Like it doesn't have to be like you said, like back in the day. I mean, I remember when I was young, one of my grandfathers passed away, and I actually got there the night that he passed away, but he passed away before I got to the house, whatever. But I remember being there for the funeral and the, what do you call it when you pray before the funeral?
Well, it would be the mass if it was a Catholic ceremony,
No, it wasn't the mass. It was something else. In Spanish, it's called velorio. I don't know in English. Anyways,
ah,
that they were
yes,
that they were,
okay.
at the house, and they all came to pay their respects at the house before they took him
Oh,
to the
right.
church.
Yes.
But I remember the heaviness, and I remember everybody crying, and I remember seeing all of that sadness there at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother, who's now passed away, but she lasted another 30 years. Um, I remember she was the funniest, most sarcastic little old lady there was. Like, I love her to pieces. I still do. And I
I
remember she
love her
was
already.
crying. Yeah, and I remember she was crying, like everybody was crying, and she was going through her process and this. And then something happened, which I don't remember. I was like 11 when this happened. Something happened and her self just came out. She like bitched at somebody else. Like, why are you making this noise? Why are we all crying? Hold on a second. Hold on. And she reacted, and I remember this so clearly. She reacted herself. She took herself out of the crying, and then she just went into okay, we got to do this mode and this mode. But she was better. And I
Yeah,
saw that shift in her. And it's funny because I haven't thought about this ever, and I'm just realizing it now. Something
awesome.
happened that it brought her back to life. Like she noticed that she was like, okay, yeah, I'm done with the crying. Yeah, I've cried
Hmm.
you, let's go to
Yep.
the next part. And of course she was sad. I'm not saying she wasn't, but she reacted differently. And I remember
Mhm.
conversations of my uncles and my aunts saying, like, why is mommy okay? Like we have to watch her because, this isn't normal. And I was looking at her
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's normal for her. Like I can
Yes.
totally
Yeah.
see it. Yeah, I can totally see it.
Everybody grieves differently, and everybody, I mean, some people do go into that deep mode and into a shell and don't come out for a long time. I mean, I had a Greek grandmother she wore black every day for the next 30 years, you know.
Mm,
Um, why? You know,
hmm.
um, I get it, but like that's a long time to focus on that.
Right,
And there was a lot of life that happened during those years that
right.
was worth celebrating and
Yeah.
worth participating in fully. So then you have other people who, move on sometimes too fast. You see it more with men, older men, because they don't like being alone. So they'll, find a lady and I always told my husband if the ladies start coming and bringing the banana bread after I die, know that they're after your money. Okay. No,
They
and I will
definitely
haunt,
want to take care of you in more than just food.
I will haunt. I'm not gonna lie. Um,
I love
so,
that. It's good, not her. The other one, maybe not
right.
her.
Right. But
That's
I
so
do want
funny.
to talk for a second about the different things that people are doing because, that too is interesting. People are not necessarily doing the $10,000 casket burial anymore
Hmm.
and the very maudlin, you know, um, cemetery or not cemetery, but the funeral home viewing and all of that. More people are doing the
Healing.
celebrations of life and they are wanting personalized ceremonies.
Hmm.
So there's a lot that we personalize, like we did last weekend. And some people are doing green burials because that's better for the environment.
What's
They
a green
want to go.
burial?
A green burial is when the person passes, the body's prepared, but not with preservatives,
Mm,
just with flowers in possibly it's like a wicker basket usually,
okay.
or sometimes they're wrapped in a cloth and just put in the ground.
Okay.
Kind of the way we bury our animals, our pets. And then,
Okay.
but there are actually green cemeteries all over the country. And they do this for people. And then, you can come and there are wildflowers growing on the graves. And then, you can have like a little headstone or a marker. Um, but it's beautiful and it's done very naturally.
Hmm.
And of course, people are still doing cremation so that they can have the ashes there and not have, and then have like photo galleries and things, memories of the person when they were alive. Like who wants to come and see a dead body?
Hmm.
When did this
Yeah.
start? In the
Right.
Civil War. Is it time for it to go? Yes, probably. We don't need, they never look the same,
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
never do. And
Yeah. No.
so then we have aquamation, which is my favorite. Aquamation is like you get your last spa bath, but turn into it's water cremation. You turn into little crystals.
Oh.
And those crystals can be put in an urn, or they can be buried, or they can be turned into jewelry. I mean, there's like all kinds of things people are doing. I like that one a lot because I just like bats. And I think,
Hmm.
wow, that sounds good to me. And I don't like the idea of being necessarily burned up in cremation. That's just something I don't like. Okay. Because I'm like, what if I'm not exactly dead in that moment? And I have that thought too. I'm human. You know, what if I suddenly wake up right when they put me in? You know,
Okay, let's
um,
not go scaring people now. Come on.
no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But they do make sure. And it is
They
it is
hope you.
somewhat regulated, but not as much as you would think. And the funeral industry isn't sometimes either. So, for me, the green burials and the aquamation are more natural kind of
Hmm.
things that you can do. And um I think they're better for the environment
Right.
ultimately.
Right.
And that's a big deal because especially with the populations being what they are,
Right.
we're running out of space for all of that.
No, I love that. And we're actually running out of time. But I
Yeah,
love that you mentioned that because I had never heard of either the green cemeteries or the aquamation. So that is
very
definitely
cool.
something. Yeah. And to me, I mean, if we're going to go with preservatives, I might as well eat them and have the
Mhm.
preservatives that I'm going to go with in my body and not fill me up with
Right.
more so that I can last more. I mean,
Yes.
uh, body's gone. If there's nothing
Right.
that can be donated to somebody that can help, just naturally get rid of me
Yeah.
would be perfect. So I actually do like
My
that.
favorite thing to say is that these bodies are loners
Yeah,
and our souls just live in them temporarily and then they go on.
yeah,
And that's beautiful.
yeah. That's funny. Like 2 nights ago. Yeah, 2 nights ago, I went to the beach to see the moon, and it was like the sunset and the whole thing. We were there
Yeah.
a bunch of friends. We got into a spiritual conversation as per usual. And I just remember that one of the conversations, I don't even know why we were talking, somebody said, we're all aliens. We're energetic beings. We're spiritual. I mean, we come to Earth and then we leave. I mean, definition of
Yeah.
alien. We're not from here. The whole thing.
Yeah.
And somebody said, yeah, the skin is a loaner, like a rental
Mhm.
is what he said. It's a rental. And I
Yeah.
laughed and I go, well, I don't think I'm getting my deposit back for this rental. So I might as well just use it. Like, what the hell?
I'm just relieved, and I just dress mine weird while it's here.
Yeah,
So,
no, perfect.
I like to have fun with it because I know it's a loner. But yeah, we go out the way we come in, same way, only in
Yeah,
reverse,
yeah,
So
yeah. Reverend, thank you so much for joining us for this
you.
truly enlightening conversation. So important, so good. And you're right, it could be fun. We had a lot of fun. We didn't talk about my eyes got
Yeah,
teary, but we didn't end up crying or anything. I mean, there are things that touch your heart, but in a beautiful way. And that's why I wanted to bring you on. So thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you if they're interested in any of what they learned or more about what you do or reach out to you?
absolutely. I'm at thepurplepriestess.com. Sorry about that. Thepurplepriestess.com. And that's I have a Facebook page too, but I try to post resources there for people and try to educate as well. Um,
Okay.
yeah, we're on a
Perfect.
mission, all of us doulas.
Yeah, no, and it really is a beautiful job. Like, yeah, that you guys are doing. I was gonna not call it a job, but it is a job
It
because you're helping them.
is.
It's
It's a
this
calling.
service. Yeah,
It's a calling
it's a
more than a
calling.
job, definitely, because it
Yeah.
does take a special kind of mentality and a special kind of energy to be able to do it.
Mm,
But we're all capable of that.
mm-hmm.
I do want to clarify and say, I think that everyone has the potential to be a really good caregiver, a really good guide, and that's what doulas are, guides.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much again for
Thank you.
joining
I
us.
appreciate it.
And bye, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Bye.